All right, so I got some pretty wild clips here lined up for you guys, at least wild in any normal society, but unfortunately we live here in the United States of America, and given the current political situation, it seems like it's pretty much par for the course for conservative politicians to come out and just explicitly call for the eradication of sorts of their political opponents. In this case, we are talking about Marxists and socialists, so I got a Trump clip that we're going to get to here in a second, but first, I want to start with Senator Rick Scott from Florida, which obviously is not doing too well given the current situation down there, and he is going to give a warning shot across the bow to, I guess, people like me who he says are no longer welcome within the state borders of Florida. So let's just go ahead and watch this clip here.
Senator Rick Scott here. Let me give you a travel warning. If you're a socialist, communist, somebody that believes in big government, I would think twice. Think twice if you're thinking about taking a vacation or moving to Florida. We're the free state of Florida. We actually don't believe in socialism. We actually know people, and some people in our state lived under it, and we know people lived under socialism. It's not good. It's not good for anybody. So if you're thinking about it, if you're thinking about coming to Florida and you're a socialist or communist, think twice. We like freedom, liberty, capitalism, things like that.
Okay, so, I mean, like, first things first, obviously, he, is just doing some virtue signaling here for, I guess, like, more of his Miami constituents, right? But, second of all, the thing that kind of stood out to me during that clip is he almost sounds drunk. I mean, what's going on? Is he drunk in this clip? I mean, go back and watch it for yourself, but towards the end of that, I mean, he's kind of, like, slurring his words, right? He's like, I mean, if you're socialism, we know some people who have lived under socialism, it's not good, I mean, socialism, it's not the best. So we believe in freedom and all of that good stuff. That's literally what he just sounded like. Okay, so first of all, I mean, you have to understand, when he characterizes socialism and communism, he's not talking about socialism and communism. He's talking about, in his words, I guess, big government, which would incorporate basically everything from, like, actual socialists to people like Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi, who are fervent capitalists who are, in the pocket of corporate America and the capitalist system, right? And he would incorporate the entire spectrum of anybody who is to the left of Ronald Reagan under that banner of socialism and communism. So understand that. He's not talking about, like, oh, if you just happen to be like a Stalin supporter, then you're not welcome within Florida. No, he's talking about anybody who believes in, like, mild left-wing social, economic reforms. Things like universal health care, things like actually investing in infrastructure, things like universal education, basic amenities, basic, rights that people should have within the wealthiest country in the history of humanity. And he is obviously against that. Now, again, what is actually the point of what he's saying here? I mean, it's unclear. I guess his point is that in Florida, we believe in, like, freedom and, free markets, so-called free markets or something like that, and kind of issuing, like, a veiled threat against left-wing people from even entering the Florida. Not exactly sure what he means by that. Is that a direct threat? Are you going to send your goons or something after somebody like me who might want to go take a vacation to a beach in Florida or something like that? I'm gonna get harassed because I'm a socialist. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's hard to take them that seriously because they don't even understand the actual definitions of socialism or communism or anarchism or any of these other different political philosophies or economic ideas, right? But at the same time, it's also kind of alarming because these are some of the most powerful people in the entire country and in the entire world. I mean, this is a senator, right? This is one of the top 100 most powerful people in the country, right? And he is basically saying socialists or left-wing people, because keep in mind, when he defines socialist, it doesn't mean socialist, it means everybody to the left of Ronald Reagan, right? They are no longer welcome into the state of Florida, apparently. So it's like, I mean, what is the outcome of that going to be? What trajectory are we heading for in the future of this country where, politicians, Republican politicians, are willing to just come out and openly, like, sort of like vaguely threaten their political opponents in this kind of a way? But now we're going to step it up even further, because here we have the leader in the GOP primary and presumably potentially one of the future presidents of the United States, Donald J. Trump, who is going to issue a similar declaration here. So let's go ahead and listen to Donald Trump
made them competitive. Today, I'm announcing a new plan to protect the integrity of our immigration system. Federal law prohibits the entry of communists and totalitarians into the United States. But my question is, what do we do with the one made them competitive? Today, I'm announcing a new plan to protect the integrity of our immigration system. Federal law prohibits the entry of communists and totalitarians into the United States. But my question is, what do we do with the ones that are already here that grew up in it? I think we have to pass a new law for them. Using federal law in Section 212F of the Immigration and Nationality Act, I will order my government to deny entry to all communists and all Marxists. Those who come to and join our country must love our country. We want them to love our country. We don't want them when they want to destroy our country. Welcome to America. We want to destroy your country. Thank you very much. So we're going to keep foreign Christian-hating communists, Marxists, and socialists out of America. We're keeping them out of America.
Okay, so again, like, what the fuck does that actually mean? You know, I mean, he's deploying, like, I guess, constitutional statutes or something like that to reject anybody who is of a left-wing persuasion from entering the country. First of all, how the fuck are you actually going to go about doing that? Is every immigrant who's coming to the United States are going to have to fill out a form in which they, you know, mark down their political affiliations, and if they're not right-wing enough, then they are not welcome in the United States? I mean, he's doing this as he is criticizing the so-called totalitarianism of socialists and communism, as he is actively calling for the deployment of policies that would restrict immigration, that would restrict not only immigration, but the domestic population's ability to hold political philosophies that are different from his own. I mean, that is like the definition of fascism. That is the definition of totalitarianism. It is incorporated as a part of those right-wing tendencies, right? And now keep in mind, on top of all of those things, which again, I mean, like, it's not surprising that Donald Trump would say something like this in sort of like a virtue signaling way, but also, like, same as Rick Scott, he could not, to save his life, accurately define what the words socialism and communism actually mean. Okay, that's first of all. So we're not talking about like a legitimate political debate about like the influences of socialism and communism. This is just virtue signaling. Okay, now if you want my definition of how I consider socialism to be, I mean, obviously I consider myself to be a socialist political commentator. I'm based here in the United States. My definition would mostly center around the, influences of economic democracy in the United States, right? Allowing workers to actually have a direct say in their workplace in the U.S. economy, instead of having a more, totalitarian, as he puts it, economic system like capitalism, where a handful of executives of the CEO class, of the shareholder class, that sits at the top and gets to make 100% of the decisions for the entire enterprise at the expense of workers, at the expense of the climate, at the expense of the American working class broadly within this country. I mean, I could give you an accurate definition, but it doesn't really matter because they're not talking about actual definitions. They're just talking about what they perceive to be their political opponents, right? I mean, these are the same motherfuckers who would turn around and say Joe Biden is a communist, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, they're communists. I mean, it's a completely incoherent, ideology that they are putting forward here. But then on top of that, right, you want to talk about actual authoritarianism. This is the same guy, Donald J. Trump, with himself and his family, that are actively forming and profiting off of deals, financial deals, with literal dictators around the world. I mean, you want to talk about Trump's ties to the Live golf situation, right? You want to talk about his recent, more recent ties ties to the government of Oman, the Sultan of Oman, who he is forming direct financial ties with, again, with his properties and with his Gulf situation, okay? You want to talk about Jared Kushner getting a multi-billion-dollar investment directly from the violent, dictatorial, authoritarian government of Saudi Arabia for his investment firm after being put in charge by his stepfather to be in charge of the Middle East foreign policy under the Trump administration. I mean, like, this guy is not adverse to fascism. He's not adverse to authoritarianism or to dictators, obviously, because he's wheeling and dealing behind the closed doors and, behind a sort of a smokescreen with those same entities, okay? So this has nothing to do with left-wing or right-wing, ideological frameworks. It has everything to do with him just choosing to go against his political opponents while simultaneously being perfectly willing to prop up right-wing authoritarianism, right-wing fascism, and totalitarianism in the way that he would define it. Okay, so there's nothing like consistent about this. I mean, again, it's not like surprising that somebody like Rick Scott or that Donald Trump would come out with a statement like this, but it also kind of is like emanating Hitler particles a little bit, at least in my perspective, because I mean, keep in mind, the first people, some of the first entities, some of the first organizations that Adolf Hitler went for in Nazi Germany was the communists. It was the socialists, right? Because that's who he perceived to be his biggest political enemy. Now, I'm not typically the person who's going to be like, oh, Donald J. Trump is literally Hitler 2.0 or anything like that, but you're kind of emanating Hitler particles right now when you come out and say, not only are we going to ban so-called socialists and communists, which you cannot even accurately define, from entering the United States, but also vaguely threatening that, like, we're gonna need some sort of national policy in order to handle them or deal with them within the U.S. domestic population. I mean, it's obviously insane. It's obviously pretty alarming, especially for somebody like myself who is an open political, socialist commentator of sorts. So, it's a little bit alarming, but at the same time, maybe this is just a little bit of a bluff here. Maybe this is a little bit of, just virtue signaling and gesturing towards his base that we hate communism, we hate authoritarianism, while they're really, I mean, at the end of the day, what they're really trying to do is just pull the wool over the eyes of a lot of their working class base of supporters, which Donald Trump does have a significant degree of working class support, which is very unfortunate because, again, they're sort of being duped by his fake populist rhetoric and pulling out these scapegoats, whether it's immigrants, whether it's the LGBTQ community, whether it's communists and socialists, pulling out those scapegoats in order to deflect from the reality of who he is. I mean, he is a billionaire con man who has been a con man throughout the entirety of his entire goddamn career, right? As a businessman, as a real estate guy, and then as a president, where he has been profiting off of his positions in power, where he has been screwing over working class Americans, and where the biggest accomplishment throughout his entire presidency was giving a tax cut to some of the biggest ghouls in the country, the wealthiest, corporations and billionaires within the United States of America. So that is who Donald Trump is. I mean, at the end of the day, again, if you are duped by this, scapegoating of his political opponents or something like that, and you are under the belief that he is actually out to serve the interests of working class Americans, think again, okay? Think again. This guy does not serve your interests. This guy serves the interests of himself, his billionaire buddies, and the corporate American class.
Everyone is saying GoodPoliticGuy has the best politics. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying